Well, thanks, Fiend. How are you, mate?
I'm great now that I've actually unmuted everyone. Oh, far out. Macca, how you doing?
Good, mate. I did have a bit of a procedure this morning, but and I loved the stuff they give you where you all go, but I'm probably still go.
And we've got Mrs. Macca there on standby in case you start to come off that stuff, and she can just sort of, give you a bit of a pep up again, top you up a bit.
Yeah, I think she thinks I'm on it permanently anyhow.
And Donkey, how you going, mate?
Well, good, mate. Champagne corks are cocked. We've got the external review. Everything's sweet up in Donkeyland.
Everything is sweet. There's tons to talk about. So I think without any further ado, why don't we just crack straight into it, shall we? So, pretty quiet news week, Pete.
Yeah, look, not much happening, mate. It's been pretty quiet. The really, I guess, big non-Crows news that has just broken in the last sort of half an hour or so is that Stephen Coniglio of GWS has re-signed on just the lazy 7-year contract with the Giants. So that's a massive coup for the Giants. It's a really huge get. And I suspect that the captaincy probably would have been thrown in there as well. And
would have to be, yep.
And a whole lot of stuff. He'll be the mayor of Parramatta out there, and that'll be. I think that's a really. Put it this way, guys. It's the kind of signing you can just never ever imagine the Gold Coast Suns ever completing. And I think that good on him, and I think that most of the AFL community would say good on them.
I think it's fantastic. Yeah, good on.
Yeah. So that's the really big news. There's a whole lot of other stuff as the silly season hots up. Closest to home, Paddy Ryder got cornered by the media down at the football club today and let slip that he was probably on his way back to Melbourne. So that's, I think, pretty much a done deal for Paddy Ryder to get going.
It's pretty interesting considering that Scotty Lycett's on the nose.
Yeah, well, I guess they've got that other young ruckman. I can't even think of his name now.
Ladhams.
He seems to have impressed them. But, they're funny the way they manage their rucks there. They always seem to have either too many or not enough. I don't know. But he's had, I think, from what I could gather from that interview, he's had a happy 4 years. There's no bad blood. I think it's just the case that they're offering 1 year, and there's going to be someone in Melbourne that'll offer him 2, and so fair enough, go for the security.
Yeah,
I reckon good business to trade him because they won't really need him next year because they've got ample rucks and they can't play them all. At least this way that helps them decide who to play.
Yeah, and Sam Gray on the way out too.
Exactly what I was about to say. No contract for Sam Gray. That's right. So he's looking for offers elsewhere. Not sure if we have a look at someone like that, but you never know. And then, of course, from our neck of the woods, you've got a bit of news today, just that Hugh Greenwood was quoted as again saying today that he really wanted to stay at the club, but they were only offering him 2, and he was quoted as saying he has multiple offers which are better than that. Yeah. So we'll see what Hugh wants to do.
Yeah, well, he's going to have it's his godfather offer, isn't it? It's the time for him to stitch up his future, and
it is.
You couldn't begrudge the guy looking at a 3 or even a 4 year deal on a bit more coin. Apparently, the money that we're offering isn't too bad. It's just the length of the contract, which would take him to 29, and I think he can get deals that'll take him into his 30s. So
I think it's one of those cases, isn't it, where you can't blame him for wanting to have the 4 year offer, and you can't blame us for not giving him one. And so it's pretty logical. I think he moves on.
Yeah, and the opposite to Alex Keith, who I think Alex is just going to fall a victim to our list restructure. I think it's too much of a Moneyball opportunity for us to be able to convert a Category B rookie into. What do you think? Maybe a very, very early second rounder.
Well, would you rather have Keith or would you rather have an early second rounder? In terms of our playing list, he's one of the few that can play outstandingly well in his position, but also, if things were going really rough, you could also put him up forward and he could also be the second ruck filling in. He's a guy I think is too good to lose, but I think you're probably right, Glenn. I think we probably will do the Moneyball thing and make what we can out of it. But I just think he's too good a bloke to lose, really.
I'm sort of flipped into, he's not going to be any good by the time we're challenging again for the flag. I think we're going to go through a rebuild. We're going to be 2 or 3 years away. And from a proper challenge, Alex Keith's going to be 31, 32 by then. Is he still going to have the same pace and athleticism that he's got now? I doubt it. Are we going to be able to do a bit better with a, early second rounder and, maybe turn that into something elite, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you, Doc. I'm happy to let him go. And for that reason that he's 27 years old and I don't see him playing in our next premiership. And also I'm very, very keen if we can possibly get a deal done for Aaron Francis from Essendon, who'd be, and he's, I think, 22, 23, and a good 3 or 4 years into him and he'll be in his prime, I think, when he can rebuild with that team. And we make no mistake, I think, I genuinely believe we're short of key position defenders. And so if they do let Keith go, there has to be a plan. Because we're stuck between Talia on one side of the ledger and Butts on the other.
Well, I'm actually leaning more towards Macca's side. I don't know whether there's enough value in this draft at Keith's price point to actually warrant dropping off. I think we're underrating Keith's value to the team in terms of his versatility, not forgetting that he can play back and forward. And with Duday back in the team next year, and with Talia not getting any younger and Hardigan seemingly losing a bit of form, and Geordie Butt's really the only current key position defender, I don't know. I think it's actually dangerous. I think it's very dangerous to get rid of Alex Keith.
Yeah, look, I think it is. And, Pete's point about Francis is probably a good one as well. I don't really think Francis is as good as Keith, though, to be honest. That's what I think. But the age difference is there. And if you're building for the future, well, you're probably right, Pete. That's probably where you might go. But, look, whichever way they go, I'll be supportive whichever way they go because I can see the advantages in keeping him. I can also see the advantages in moving him on. So I think that's one we just sit on our hands and watch. Yeah.
What else is going on? Are we? I saw today that Jones and Jacobs and who was the other one is available for the SANFL finals.
Fogarty.
Fogarty, that's right.
Fogarty's available.
How do we feel about Sauce maybe taking O'Brien's spot in the finals in the SANFL?
Well, O'Brien can't have it.
No, he can't play.
Yeah, he's
not eligible.
I don't have an issue with it because he's ineligible. Yeah, he's ineligible.
Oh, there you go. That's stupid.
Did he play the last three in the? He had to play at least the. I thought that he had to play half the season in half the number of games you played in the SANFL, and they also had to be the last three.
I thought you had to play more games in the SANFL than you did in the AFL.
Correct. Sorry,
that's the one, Donk. As long as you played more games in the SANFL than you have in the AFL, so no issues with that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Just looking at a couple of other things, I guess Crows related. Malcolm Blight has gone absolutely bang on the Crows this evening on radio. He has called the leadership of the Crows pathetic. He said that surely that Fagan's got no alternative but to fall on his sword, and that he's overseen a train wreck of a club.
Oh,
and how can he still be putting his hand out for a wage?
That's a massive swipe.
That's Blighty on Sports Day. So anyway, that's a big swipe from.
Well, it's interesting that Malcolm's gone after Fagan instead of Rashido or Burton, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Because when I think about things, and we won't get into it too much just yet, but when I think about things, I think that Andrew's actually done a good job financially, and which is probably 2/3 of his KPIs is the operational stuff. And I think the footy department's the train wreck, and that's where Rue and Burton have got to put up their hands. So I'm very very fascinated to see Malcolm go so hard at a non-ex-Adelaide footballer.
Yeah, the interesting thing, though, is that both Blight and now Blight and Ruse, what they're really saying is, if you've got a decent CEO, you wouldn't have this train wreck. And so, therefore, they are saying that it is the football department that is the wreckage, but a decent CEO would never have allowed it to get to that stage.
Yeah.
That's where they're putting it onto Fagan. And if you think about it in every business, if you're running a business and you've got this the chief executive, and he's very good in one particular area, but he's got an absolute disaster in the real thing that everybody's interested in, he's not going to last.
Well, I'm going to absolutely defend the club against what I thought were, pretty ridiculous comments from Paul Roos.
Oh, well, he is ridiculous.
He's just a Crows hater, and he always has been.
Yeah,
and he was actually wrong in what he was saying anyway, because he was talking about all of these other clubs that they do their internal reviews, and how Brendan Gale did the Richmond internal review, which we know is crap because it was actually an external review that Richmond did by Ernst & Young, and that's quite that's open source, so you can read all about that. And so it's clearly the case that Richmond had an external review, and Brendan Gale was the CEO. So what is he supposed to resign? What a stupid comment.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that we've announced that we'll be doing an internal review anyway. So this will be we want to leave the review talk to later, but it's just topical from the point of view of this ridiculous statement from Roos.
Yeah.
That internal review will be run parallel to the external review anyway. So they will be doing that. So he's just wrong, they were just really ill-considered comments, I think.
Yeah, I thought Caro was better last night than the Fox stuff. But Paul Roos, as you said, Pete, he just loves any opportunity to sink the boots in and to the Crows, and he really is quite clueless about the way our club operates. The only thing that I'd say in Fagan's defence is that it really depends on the delineation of tasks, because he comes from a rugby background, and if he's been brought in as a financial custodian or operational custodian, and with a view that others will look after the footy operations, then it's not so much a failure of Andrew Fagan, it's a failure of the selection process not to put experienced people in the footy department. And when you look at the fact that we've got Rashudo and Burton, who neither of whom have got any experience in running a footy department in the top two jobs, it begs the question, who was responsible for bringing those people on board? It was the board that brought Rashudo in. And it was ostensibly Rashudo that brought Brett Burton in. So I don't know whether Andrew's to blame for the footy operations stuff.
No, I tend to agree, and I think that we get back to that. I guess we'll talk about this a bit later, but we get back to that whole insiders outsiders issue, I think, which is certainly an interesting thing. But in terms of AFL news, look, there'll just be bits and pieces now. Sort of, I think the lad from Gold Coast wants to trade back to Melbourne, Jack Martin.
Yep.
He's looking at a trade back. I think that it's the only one I can think of at the moment. But there'll be bits and pieces of people wanting trades here. Hill from Fremantle, that has been disclosed, he wants to trade to Melbourne. So they'll just be coming thick and fast now as the finals unfold.
Yeah, and I don't think you have to be Einstein to predict in advance that this will probably be a record number of players moving from one club to another.
I think
it just seems to get easier and easier every year, and contracts mean nothing. The player just go wherever they can and wherever they want to, and whatever's been offered. So you can't really talk about loyalty in football anymore, because I think all you can expect from the player is loyalty for the season they're paid for.
I think that's right, Macca.
Yep.
Probably a good time to say a huge congratulations to Charlie Cameron, who made the 40-man squad for the All-Australian team. Massive achievement from Charlie. I don't think anyone would have picked when he was in Adelaide that he would have been an All-Australian squad member. And tellingly, the only squad member from Adelaide is Tales, which kind of surprised me, because Daniel's had an up and down season as far as I'm concerned.
Had a terrific spell probably about 2/3 of the way through the season. It was the last part of the season, the last couple of games where he didn't go so well. But he did have a very good patch there, and that's probably when they were sitting down and talking about the team, and that's why he got selected.
I thought he had a good, like so many of them. I mean, if he'd picked the All-Australian team at the bye, then Brad Crouch is a lock as well.
Correct.
So a lot of them had good seasons up until the bye, but I think that for me, I mean, he had an outstanding game against West Coast where he blanketed Josh Kennedy, an absolute peeler of a game. He had a couple of. He probably just extended his form a little bit more than some of those others did, and so certainly, congratulations. I don't think he'd make the final team, but and well done anyway to Daniel Taylor. It's a fine achievement.
And Alex Keith probably a victim of overwork in the end.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's probably a fair call. He certainly didn't look himself last weekend in Ballarat.
No, not at all.
He's obviously not fit.
Well, you'd get a nasty ankle injury, and I think he, for some reason, it's been very hard to get right. And he probably played not 100% right.
Yeah, well, I think he played not 100% right for quite a few weeks, Mac. A couple of notables: Caniglio not making it, Brad Hill not making it, Zach Merritt not making it. There's probably a few that are unlucky. Lockie Whitfield probably didn't play enough games. So a few blokes that could probably consider themselves a bit stiff.
Yeah, Caniglio unfortunately missed too many games because of that injury. I think it was about leading up to about 8 games he might have missed.
Yeah, but I reckon he'll still be top 5 in the Brownlow, Mac.
Oh, his season had been outstanding before that, absolutely outstanding. And even if they had picked him, he'd be very worthy. But they seem to also want to require a certain minimum amount of games to be able to get for the player to get selected. So I think he's unlucky, but that's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Zach Merritt could have. It might have been okay if he'd played a few more games against the Crows. He probably would have pushed for selection.
That's the whole bloody competition.
Yeah, see, Luke Shuey had 2 games against the Crows, so he was he was no pun intended. But he was a shoe in.
Very good.
Merritt did have a dull patch in the middle of the year too, when he was starting to be tagged, but he worked his way through the tag, and by probably the last few games of the year, he was playing very well.
Well, and speaking of Essendon, what's the deal with them basically giving Worsfold notice, even though he's gotten them to the finals, and tons of talk that Ben Rutten is the incumbent there, and Essendon have been shopping around for some senior blokes to put around him.
So weird.
It is weird.
So weird. Can we get Woosher back to be a strategy coach or something like that?
Well, it's not the same club, he wouldn't be.
I think he had his chance to be here, don't you reckon?
And he wasn't interested.
I don't know whether he's the right bloke anyway, and we won't. Let's not get into that now. But I just found it surprising that would come out. On the eve of the finals. On the eve of the finals, yeah, absolutely. With a big game against West Coast coming up, basically Madness. You do well or you're out. Whew.
Madness.
Yeah.
Mind you, Essendon haven't really gone. They've treaded water for the last 3 years. They've snuck into the finals probably 2 out of the 3, maybe 3 out of the 3 the last 3 years, but never, haven't fired a shot. So that's probably why that ultimatum has been given.
Yeah, but Cara was quite adamant that is the case. So I think it's quite illogical, really, to be talked about as publicly as this at this stage.
Yeah.
You can't go to a final with that type of uncertainty, surely.
I wouldn't have thought. But there again, I mean, does anyone think they're going to do any damage over in the West next week?
No, I don't.
Yeah. Anything else, Pete?
No, I think that's it, mate. I think we, I'd like the South Australian clubs are the news, really. So that's, we can, I guess we'll get to that, but that's really what dominates the airwaves.
Well, there was one piece of news. Pete did miss a very important piece of news there that our noble fiend, our leader, he was in the newspapers, and I hope you'll read the article in the Advertiser, but the leader of CrowCast had to say, which was very, very good, and got a lot of publicity, and does give a lot of authenticity to this show, and also shows that we don't talk out of our asses all the time. Maybe we do a lot, but not all the time. And so congrats to Fiend on that particular achievement. Well done.
Thanks, Mac, but I just want to put the reason why the advertiser were interested is because of our petition. It was the fact that we'd got 600 signatures together, forwarded them to the club. That was the basis of their story. That's what they picked up from us. And it absolutely, it was great recognition for the CrowCast, but it was probably great recognition for the people that got around the petition the way they did, because 600 on the surface you probably think, oh, we should have got more, but 600, if you put 600 into a room, if you get 600 dissenters getting into a room at the next AGM, it's a fair voice.
Is that 1%, do you reckon? No, it was terrific. It was really, really good to see the podcast mentioned. I think they mentioned Two Crows podcast as well.
Yeah.
I think it's important that I think we talked about it off air that with social media now and with people doing their own casts, and there is a way for people to mobilise, and we see this in so many other forms, but never before has there been the opportunity through social media and podcasts and fan casts and the like to without wanting to sound a bit wanky, but to unite and to mobilise. And I think that the backlash that has absolutely enveloped the club since Sunday has been enormous, and actually probably before that has been enormous, and they've really had no choice but to act because we've been able to mobilise fans and members.
And look, it's exactly right. And as I said to Liz Walsh, who interviewed me unexpectedly, it's really the only mechanism that we have as members and for supporters at the moment to put any sort of pressure. And the fact that we spoke about wanting a review back sort of towards the end of July, and that quickly became the mantra, didn't it? From everyone, media and supporters alike. So well done to everyone. My biggest disappointment is that we sent that petition through to the club. I actually collated all the signatures, and don't worry, everyone who signed it, I blanked out your email, so you're not going to start getting random marketing emails from the club. And there's been no acknowledgement from the club. Now, I sent it to Rob Chapman, I sent it to Andrew Fagan, I sent it to Mark Rasciuto, and I sent it to Ian Shuttleworth. And I haven't had a thanks for your email. We'll get back to you on that. I don't want to hook into the club too much, but I got to say that a quick thanks for your email, we'll chat about it later, would have been nice.
Well, I think this goes, and I guess we're moving into this sphere of discussion now, but it really, if anybody listened to the interview of Fags this morning with David Penberthy and Will Goodings, if anybody caught that, it was an interesting interview, and it was interesting because David Penberthy is a former political reporter. He's a hard-hitting journalist. He's not a he's no soft touch or yes man, and he absolutely drilled Fags. And if you haven't heard the interview, I'd recommend you go and have a look at it on Facebook. It's up there, and it is well worth a listen, because he absolutely nailed Fags on the fact that the perception that they're arrogant, they're aloof, and that they don't engage. And of course, I think the real problem is that you would just like to say, what we'd like to see is just for once somebody at that club to put their hand up and say, you know what, if that's how you feel, then we apologise and we'll try and do better. But consistently all you get is well no, that's not right. We do this and we do that.
Yep.
And Penberthy just chased him like a bloody fox down a rabbit hole. He kept chasing him, and in the end, I thought that the beauty was when Fags threw it back at Pembo and said, "Come on, you know how passionate we are, Pembo. You know what people are like inside the club." And Pembo said, "Oh mate," he said, "nobody's got any doubt about the passion down there. It's just the execution."
Yeah, yeah, bang, right back at you.
Bang, right there. So
all due respect, but Andrew's words and his comments on that interview and other interviews that I've heard recently, exactly the same rhetoric that he gave myself and Nikki and Cam when we went down there a few weeks ago. It was the same sort of thing. Oh, don't you think that we work so hard? There was an excellent question that was put by our friend Sanders on Big Footy, and it was, I'll paraphrase because I haven't got it in front of me, but it was words to the effect of, what would you say to Crows fans with regards to, the desire to win the next premiership, or where we're at in terms of winning the next premiership? And Andrew's response was, there is no one outside of the club more passionate about winning a premiership than there are people inside. And that's been the mantra from the club all the way through. We're working hard. We work very hard. You've got no idea about the effort that we make. The sacrifices, the passion. And Pembo's response today was excellent, because it goes to the crux of the matter. Because I don't think anyone doubts that people are putting in at the club, players and coaches and staff and everyone are trying, but that doesn't make them the right people, does it?
That is the whole key to it, isn't it? It's very similar to when the chairman and Fagan both went out defending Birdman and other appointments that Roo has made, and about not putting in Roo's mates, and they trotted out the same rhetoric, the same party lines that, and trying to get the people to back down on their statement, saying, "Are you suggesting that Roo's are putting in his mates?" And of course, everybody doesn't want to say that outright. But what they're not concentrating upon is the quality of what Roo's put in there. That's the whole key to it. It's not whether Roo put in there his mates or whatever. It's how good they are. If they're not good enough, well, that's it. And they aren't good enough.
And I thought the other really interesting go that he had, because he started off the interview talking about Rashido's comments, and he gave credit to Roo for apologising. But he said to Faith, that was no slip of the tongue. He said that was a Freudian slip.
Yep.
And it's reflective of how you people feel about the supporters. And that they're, I can't remember the irritants or something like that. I can't remember the term that he used. So it was, as I said, it's on Facebook. Have a listen. It was an interesting interview, and it was interesting to have, it was a no fluff interview.
No,
Pembo also penned an article for the Advertiser, which I read probably about an hour and a half ago. And one of the things that I took away from that is, apart from the spray that he said today, he pulled apart the problem with the media responses and the way that the Crows are controlling their message coming out at the moment. And they talk a lot about, they give up more players for interview, and they offer more social media content through their production house and all those other things that are all the love and fluff that they do. And it is actually really good work. That is good, positive work that a club should be doing. But they hide behind that and think that covers for not being responsive and not being accountable for all the other things that they do. And the problem with the whole show at the moment, and whether we haven't seen the whole part of the review and how it's popping out and all that. And the problem that people are going to have is that the message from the club is never been authentic. There is a track record of misinformation, disinformation, and lying coming out around important issues such as sort of Tippetgate and Mein Kampf, and even the injuries sort of situation we had last year. And that complete lack of trust and that breakdown, and then the obfuscation of the message coming out, means that people just really struggle to believe what the club is doing. And for me, 70% of my heart wants to believe that this review is happening right now. Is clean and open and external, but there's a solid 30% of me that's just really worried that I'm drinking the same Kool-Aid again, and I'm going to have the same problem.
Well, I've got to say something there, Donkey. I was in your camp, but I think Roo coming out and making that great big blue that he did was the greatest asset that we could have had to ensure that the external review is done in a proper manner.
100%.
Because what he did, he mobilised all the silent people out there who were feeling a lot but not saying anything. And all of a sudden, there became this absolute torrent, this flood of people just letting off their steam and anger at the way that the club treats them. And all of a sudden, Fagan's had to come out and say how bad Roo was saying it, etc., etc. What they've done is they've cornered themselves. Because Roo's done that, he's actually put them right up against the wall, and now they have to do a proper external review.
Yeah,
it was the breaking of the dam that
exactly.
Pembo described it. Said to Fags, the Roo's comments was the breaking of the dam.
Did he? Is that what he said?
Yep. And then Roo doubling down with his apology and saying that he really likes 99% of Crows supporters.
Oh God, that's just
and hence the title of this episode, the 1%ers, because I don't know where we sit on the scale. But yeah, he quickly deleted that. Look, and I think like everyone else, I think the heart is in the right place for Rashido, but I think it's indicative of an insular culture down there. I think it's for whatever reason there's an adversarial sort of an attitude at the Crows, and whether that's because of they've just been worn down as an organisation through years of scrutiny by the likes of Rucci and all the rest of it, to the extent where they've now just pulled ranks and everyone that's not inside the club doesn't know what they're talking about, which is an incredibly dangerous position to take.
That's how you develop a family tree in Alabama. That's what it is.
That's exactly right.
Well, it is. And, Fagan this morning, he went on about how much, that more than any other club, they make players available and they do all these things. And Pembo sort of said, well, do you honestly think that we're going to sit here in the morning with Eddie Betts and grill him about whether he thinks there should be a review of the club's operations?
Yeah.
And they're not, obviously. It's a ridiculous comment. I do think though that I do have a sense that the review has been announced on the run. I think that that they were probably looking at it, but I think that the comments of Roo have precipitated action quicker than they probably would have liked, and I suspect that the fact they haven't nailed down the two other people on the panel of this review is indicative of the fact that it's on the run. I'll be certainly interested to see if we look at the composition of the panel as it currently stands. We have a sports scientist, we have essentially a performance psychologist, if you want to. And I think that's well and good. So what we're looking at, what the interesting thing will be for me is the next two positions. We're told that they'll be football kind of people. Now, I don't mind if they have, like there was a rumour on radio tonight that it may be someone like Matthew Pavlik. Now, I've got no confirmation of that at all. But there was a rumour going around that was Matthew Pavlik. Now, that's fine if you're going to have senior kind of football person, but that last position then must be, in the old vernacular, a toe cutter. You have to have a toe cutter. And you know what I mean by a toe cutter. Yep. And when you look at the review that Richmond did, they put it out to Ernst & Young. Well, there's no greater toe cutters in the world than firms like that. And, of course, at the end of that review, people were dismissed, people were moved on because, those people, can barely look at themselves in the mirror at night, and they will cut you as soon as look at you. Now, if you've got you certainly wouldn't put that responsibility on health professionals, and I'm sure that somebody of the standing in the football community of like Matthew Pavlik is not going to want to be exiting a review like that with blood on his hands and all the kind of mess that would go with that, because it would get messy, and he's not going to want to, So I want to make, so if you've got someone to look at, the strength and conditioning, and you've got someone to look at all of the psych and the relationships and all of that kind of stuff, I think that's all good. That's important. If you want to have someone looking like a Pavlik looking at the football program, that's great. But what will tell me whether they're fair income with this review is that fourth person, and whether that person is qualified to go in and look at the operations of the club, appointments, qualifications, conflicts of interest, all of those things, to go in there and make those assessments, and make the assessments that if there are people that need to go, that they'll have no problem in making those recommendations.
Well, the interesting thing about, I 100% agree with you, by the way, Pete. And the one football person that comes to my mind is Brian Cunningham. Brian Cunningham actually has done football club reviews before. And on top of that, he also did a review of the South Australian harness racing industry. His recommendations were fantastic. Because I race paces down there, and I know that they put in a fantastic report and would have meant certain people losing their positions. So they didn't implement it for the very thing that you're talking about, Pete. And as a result of that, they're going down the gurgler and they're financially in major troubles. And but if they'd followed what Bucky said, it would have actually been a good resolution. Bucky is a very intelligent man. I've had the fortune of having a lot of conversations with him, and he isn't just an ex-footballer. He's a football man who's been a top administrator, and he's a football man who is very discerning and would totally understand what's going on inside of a football club. He'd get to the bottom of it very quickly indeed. And that's probably why they won't use him. But just on the actual review itself, just coming back, it started off really badly because with Chapman saying that when he announced the review, but then he announced one by one all the individual major players and saying that they had his total backing, and then even pumping up bloody Burton's tyres and saying that he was going to end up being elite. Now, at that stage, I had no faith in this whole process whatsoever. When the chairman is actually, before it's even started, before it's even had any legs at all, he's saying how good these people are, and that was absolutely stupid. And the one thing I liked about the fact that Rashido got into that hole and then had to backtrack on it, and he did have to say, this review will, if it could be me, it could be so-and-so, it could be, and he named everybody. If they say they have to go, they have to go. And the interesting thing is that, and I feel sorry for Roo in a way, because I think Roo's a good bloke. He mightn't be smart enough to get everything right in terms of the football world, but I think he's a genuine guy, and I think he's a nice guy. But I think he's really stuffed up internally. But the one thing about it, I think it has brought it back to reality. And Chapman, I think, might have been trying to fluff his way through it, but he can't anymore.
Now, an interesting thing on the chat that I didn't realise, and Moyley's brought it to our attention, but apparently on Monday on 5AA, Chapman basically called out certain podcasts in terms of being full of shit, basically. Anyone hear that? Mackie, you're a 5AA listener.
Yeah, I actually, it depends what time. I don't get up too early. But I didn't hear that one, no.
I'll have to go back and listen to that one, but that's interesting. Look, I don't hold out. My personal view is that this is all a bit of a whitewash, Peter. I don't think that they're serious. Look, I don't... It all comes down to me to who is commissioning this. Now, in the case of Richmond and Geelong, it was the board that commissioned a top-to-bottom review of the football department. So, in our case, it doesn't seem to me that the board are driving this. Certainly, Chapman's on the front foot with it, but so is Andrew, and so is Mark, and a few others. So, I don't know whether this is something that the board has put on the football department. I think this is something that the football club has seen fit to publicise that they're doing, when in actual fact, it's not much different to what they do every year. And Andrew, in his conversation with us, a few weeks back, pointed out that when we asked about a review back then, he pointed out that the club is in constant review. We often bring in external experts in certain areas that we're scrutinising or assessing or whatever. And that would seem to be in line with the people that we've brought in so far, named so far. And, pardon me, I just feel like they've decided to go public with their usual process in an effort to placate the masses. And to me, this review isn't driven by the right people and it's not being implemented or publicised for the right reasons.
Well, I don't know. The thing was, when we look at the two people they've got so far, I can understand why you say what you say, because they can be one thing or the other. They can either be genuine or not genuine, in the sense of either just doing what they're told or genuinely coming up with. But I don't think they are the right people to be saying so-and-so should go. It'll come back to the football people, in my opinion, because I'll talk to the players and I'll talk to the coaches. And the one coach who I think is going to spill his guts is Don Pike. I think Don Pike absolutely detests Brett Burton. You can actually tell him every time he's near me, he looks like he's almost going to vomit. And I think that he was denied his coaches of choice, assistant coaches of choice, because of the fact that we had to spend the money on Steve Saunders to fix up Burton's bloody messes. So I think Don Pike will squeal like a stuck pig, and I think there'll be a lot of players will too. And I think that's the one thing that's going to be in the favour of perhaps getting a bit of honesty in this whole thing.
And I think that it goes to the appointment of the psychologist. I think that it is an interesting appointment, and I suspect that there would be a significant examination of what went on last year. I would certainly hope so anyway. And if a lot of the rumours are to be believed, and that is that there was a leadership group that fronted Fagan and was looking for a whole lot of things to be done and things that weren't done, and relationships were affected, I think it would be very pertinent for somebody in that position and with those qualifications to interview and actually examine the relationships, because that appears to me to be a significant factor down there, and that is the relationships between people that are managing the football department, relationships between the coaches and the players. It all seems to be on the table. And so I think that I'll certainly be interested to have a look at how that all plays out. Finn, as to your point, I think that it looks to me as though they're trying to form like a panel. Now, if I think that there's a difference in getting just a loose, and I'm not sure that I mean, it may well be that they are this, but I think there's a difference between a commissioned panel who work together to prepare a single report, top to bottom, of what's going on in the football club. That would seem to me to be something that falls short of what Richmond did, but is a little bit more than getting ad hoc consultants in to look at various sort of micro problems. So I guess what I'm saying is that if this is a macro approach, then I guess that's at least something. Now, we're not going to know that until the review plays out, until the key finding. They've said that they'll release the key findings, and so we'll see what those key findings are. But I'm disappointed that it falls short of what Richmond did, because I just think to myself, if you've got a firm of consultants there who have a sports advisory practice, and they have a person there who specialises, he's a specialist management consultant in sporting bodies, and who has consulted to Cricket Australia, to swimming, to a whole lot of other places, that did a top to bottom on Richmond, who did a whole lot of toe cutting and a whole lot of restructuring, and one of the most perennially underachieving clubs in recent history came out the very next year from nowhere and grabbed a flag. So, with that evidence, I cannot understand why you wouldn't just pick up the phone and say to this guy, whatever you did at Richmond, come and do it here.
Yeah, very good point.
I agree with you, Peter, and there's a great article in the Herald Sun at the time about the main points of that review, and it was good stuff. And the problem that I've got is that, and the reason I guess for my cynicism, is that you can't have blokes that are supposedly going to be subject to the review actually talking about the review and talking about how it's going to be implemented and who's going to be on board. It doesn't make sense. The people who should be talking about the review are the people who commissioned it, which should, at the very least, have been Mark Rasciuto or other members of the board or the board itself. But the fact that we've got Andrew Fagan making comments about the the review process, and Don Pike making comments about the review process, etc. It just says to me that it hasn't come from a high enough level to be a bona fide top to bottom review. It's just simply the same thing that they do every year. So anyway, we'll wait and see on that one.
Yeah, there was one other thing that really did bother me about the whole thing. Rue also made the comment that at the same time as the external review, there will be an internal review. And at the end of it, they'll put all the things together and collate them. In other words, that makes it sound like the internal people are going to have a say in the overall findings of
That's my point, Macca.
Yeah, and that if it is going to be done in that manner, well, as Rue put it, then it's probably not going to be worth a piece of cocky shit, because of the fact that these people will defend themselves to the end, as they've always shown. That they're not worried about the truth; they're only worried about themselves, and also protecting the people they've appointed, because otherwise that makes them look bad. So that's the one thing that really does bother me. The independent one can do their own thing and criticise themselves and keep it to themselves. The external review should be an external review, and it should be an outsider's point of view, and it should make it very clear what they see is glaringly wrong and to be fixed. So I think if it's going to be done like the way they're talking about it, put the two together, throw them around and see what comes out, that's no good.
Yeah. Now, I need to interject here because we're at risk of going over time, and Peter and I had the great pleasure, along with Nikki, last night to have a fantastic chat, wasn't it, Pete, with none other than Crows ambassador and pioneering women's journalist Angela Pippos. For those who don't know who Angela is, she's a host of ABC Grandstand and has been a sports journalist in the ABC for quite a number of years. She's written a couple of books. She's a well-respected public speaker. She's an advocate for women in sport and women in sports journalism. And I tell you what, it was a very engaging chat, wasn't it, Peter?
Well, it was, and my goodness me, I thought we would be lucky to get her for 15 or 20 minutes, and an hour, probably an hour and a half later, we were still just chewing the fat.
That was amazing.
She was just fabulous. She was really, really brilliant.
So I've broken down the interview into 3 parts, and we're going to play part 1 now. And it's, as it turned out, it was probably the last thing that we spoke with Angela about, but it's very topical in terms of the current discussion. So you've probably had enough of listening to us talk about it for a little while. So let's hear from someone from the media, a Crows ambassador and a lovely lady, Angela Pippos.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to all of the CrowCast listeners. Great to have you all along, and this is the latest edition of a series of interviews that we're hoping to get done over the next few weeks. We're very, very lucky and fortunate to have with us this evening one of the very, very well-known and popular Crows ambassadors. It's Angela Pippos. Angela, how are you this evening?
I'm very well. I'm just coming to terms with my September, which will not involve our club again. So in a sense, I'll be more emotionally stable in September.
Yeah.
So there's the silver lining. I'll be an easier person to live with in September without the Crows playing.
And I reckon if you're anything like us, you'll be a bit lighter in the pocket as well, not having to, or heavier in the pocket really, not having to spend all that money getting around to interstate finals.
That's true, but it's really it's the emotional toll of being a fan. I feel like I've been, through the washing machine this season. I'm just kind of exhausted from believing and then sort of not believing and then believing again. And last year was a challenging year, but see, last year we were able to attribute our failure to the camp. It was always because of the premiership hangover, and the camp was the reason why we underperformed. Whereas this year, I haven't really found the answer. I'm left with so many questions and not very many answers.
Now, Angela, you are a Crows ambassador, and so we do appreciate that you might need to tread a little bit nimbly over the next series of questions, but I'm really interested from a supporter's perspective and also from a sporting journalist perspective, how you've seen the club's let's call it progress since the tragedy in 2015, and we've had some highs and lows, and obviously there's a bit of a crisis happening at the moment. What's your take on all of that from those perspectives?
Well, I've thought a little bit about the past couple of years, and I kind of break it down into on-field and off-field. And I think the on-field problems are very clear to see. You don't have to be a really discerning fan to recognise that there's a lack of speed in the midfield. We've all seen it this year in particular. We turn the ball over too often. We've had a big problem getting our forward structure right. And I mean, often I think, why aren't they leading into space? Why is it they making it look more difficult than it actually is? And the other thing I've noticed on the field this year is that other sides go on a roll, don't they?
Yeah.
And we can't seem to snap that. It seems to get out of control, and we've had those infamous second half fade out. So there's been problems on the field, and at the start you sort of think, oh, perhaps these are isolated events, but then it becomes a pattern, and you know that our performance since the bye has been really awful and hard to watch, and it's thrown up a lot of questions about our players. We do need to inject some more speed in there, but also their endeavour and their commitment and their work rate has been questioned. And that leads to the off-field stuff. So while we're watching the Crows play, there's that sort of niggling question about, do the problems run deeper than just having, a slow midfield? Is there a disconnect between the club and some leaders? And people have been asking me this all year. I mean, the problem when you're sort of a rare Crows fan in Melbourne with a profile is that all the questions get directed at you.
Yeah.
And I don't know the answers. I'm not in the inner sanctum. But it does appear that there's a disconnect between some senior players and the club, and whether that's just because they're getting dropped and they're in and out of the side, or whether it sort of runs more deeply than that, I don't really know. I mean, some people have suggested that it goes back to the pre-season camp last year. And I don't know about that. I'm not so sure, but I do know that some players carried resentment and unhappiness after that camp. And, perhaps some of that resentment is still there. So, look, for me, the best thing really is to have this review, the external review, as well as the internal review, because we need to find out, what is going wrong. We need to move on those players who don't want to be there. And I know that's easier said than done, but we need to trade players who don't want to be there and get draft picks and start to rebuild this club back to what it was. I mean, it's only in 2017 that we got through to a grand final. I mean, it's quite remarkable how dramatic the fall has been.
Yeah.
And I think it's really easy. It's really easy to target Don Pike. It's almost, for me, it feels like a number of players have been let off the hook by focusing so much on the coach. And I know that, some of the criticism around his conservatism is warranted, but I still think that, some of the performances by senior players have just been lamentable, really.
Yeah.
But the other thing I'd like to say is that it's another criticism that's been fired off is it's such a boys' club. Now, my response is, show me an AFL club that's not a boys' club. So I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I hardly, you can't say that the Adelaide Crows are the only boys' club going around. Mates are giving mates jobs everywhere. There are some clubs, and I'm thinking of Richmond, that are doing a really good job in breaking down that boys' club atmosphere. And, the wonderful Peggy O'Neill is driving that change. So, look, there are clubs that are doing it better, but it's a feature of every AFL club that, mates are giving mates jobs all the time. So it's not just something that is peculiar to the Crows. It's something that we need to break down, not just in AFL, but in sport across the board. We have to stop seeing it as a man's domain, and get more women. And it's not just women; it's different types of men involved in AFL clubs as well. Let's just not assume that a former player is the best person for the job. Let's be a little bit more thorough in search for people to run a club.
Now, you've got a media perspective, so given what you've just said, and I don't disagree, I think there's lots of examples of boys' club mentality amongst AFL and other sporting clubs. But do you feel then that the club should be more upfront about that and, as an extension, be a little bit more transparent in terms of its operations in general?
Yes, I agree with that. I mean, the perception of the Adelaide Crows over here, certainly in Victoria, is that they're an arrogant club. And I think because they have the run of the state and have been successful on and off the field, it has created that perhaps that arrogance that many people see. I mean, there's a fine line between, strength and arrogance. And I think there have been times, of course, where the Crows have come across as arrogant, and as recently as, Mark Rasciuto's comment about
that's what
fans.
I was leading to.
Now that, at best, that is a clumsy use of words. And, I was pleased to hear him apologise, because that's, and it was the wrong thing to say, but I also don't want us to get so caught up in that we lose sight of what actually has to happen to fix the problems. So I would like to see the club be more transparent and perhaps shed some of those old ways of management, that sort of not being able to handle criticism and then sort of doubling down is a very old way of dealing with a problem.
Yeah.
I think we could modernise a bit, and so it's being more transparent and just tackling problems a different way, rather than that knee-jerk response of, well, no, we're all right, we'll show you.
Yeah.
It needs to be handled differently, and the best way to get the right outcomes around the boardroom table is to have diversity, and it is to tackle a problem or a challenge in a number of different ways, and not all see it the same way, and to really challenge each other. And a bit more diversity would be a good thing.
Well, and diversity aside, I think you'd probably agree that 2015 and the the arrival of Phil Walsh, he was almost that character anyway, Jenner aside, because he wasn't a fan of the Adelaide Football Club. He was an outsider, and he did provide a lot of rhetoric in terms of, no spin, etc., etc. Do you feel a little bit let down as a supporter that the club seems to have walked back on that, on those mantras of 2015?
Yes, look, Gosh, I mean, the life of a supporter, I go through just about every possible emotion on a daily basis. And I feel I've had some really good chats with Rob Chapman over the past couple of years, and I feel like I've got, I have a good relationship with him. And, we've talked about leadership and the sort of traits that we look for in our leaders, and I feel like he does hear me out, and I come from often a different point of view to him, but I feel like when I do grab those moments with him in the corner of a room and I say, look, this is how I would handle that. And a lot of I can't tell you about all the conversations I've had with him, but I do feel like he listens to me. And I really hope that I get another opportunity to have a good chat to him about, some of the things that I haven't agreed with this year. And, perhaps I can be a very small voice of change around the place, because, I feel like that there is this, sometimes they just all march to the same tune, and it's sometimes, it's always important to hear another side to a problem, the best way of tackling a problem, and that's where I don't think they always listen.
Congratulations, your nomination's been accepted, Angela.
Can I be the chairwoman and not live in Adelaide, though?
Well, Koshy does it. Eddie did it for a while.
I think if anybody could do it, it'd be you.
Yeah, well, so I'll have to. All right, when I get up tomorrow, I'll email Rob and I'll tell him that this has started. There's been a campaign that has begun.
Totally.
And yes, because what we don't want to finish 11th or 12th or next year.
We're done.
Okay,
with that.
we don't want to. We've done 2 years of that, and it is a proud club and it's a great club, and I'm looking forward to seeing and hearing about these reviews and what they unearth, and we've also lost a lot of key players over the years, and that's another thing that doesn't always get spoken about, but. We almost lost the entire spine with players going back and allegedly going home and going elsewhere and various things. But I've got to say this. In Melbourne, there is more talk at the moment about the Crows and Port Adelaide than the Melbourne Football Club. So even though it's a difficult time for us, and it is certainly challenging, people care. People really care about Adelaide. I think Melbourne fans have kind of shut up shop, and their fall has been very dramatic, and they just kind of, I don't know, have they just all gone skiing? I don't
Now, we don't stereotype on the CrowCast, Angela.
Sorry, delete that bit. No, but there is a lot of talk about Adelaide and Port Adelaide. It's really interesting that that's occupying a lot of airtime and, newspaper columns at the moment, when, the oldest club, or one of the oldest clubs in the competition, isn't attracting that much debate, discussion and interest. So read into that what you will.
Well, I think apart from Gary Lyon, most people have forgotten that Melbourne are in the competition. Might as well be a
that's more
buy.
savage than my skiing line.
And I hope that you guys and ladies all enjoyed that first part of Angela's interview. She's an incredibly engaging woman, and I thought she had some really good perspectives there, not only from an ambassador's point of view, but from a journalistic point of view, and also just someone with a little bit of insight into the machinations of the club.
What I really liked, Fane, was that she was a Crows ambassador, but we didn't get just a whole lot of fluff.
Absolutely,
yep. She called it as she saw it, and she was quite happy to call her. Well, she was just relating, I guess, what the perceptions of the club are, and she called it as she saw it, and she's in the media, and we're considered to be arrogant, and we've got to wear that.
And
I thought it was interesting.
Sorry, the other. Well, what was interesting was the fact that I've always felt this, that the Melbourne press love getting into us, and we do give them the opportunity so often. And the fact that she's saying that we're dominating the airways over there, Melbourne, who's just had a absolute prick of a year, nobody's not saying very much about it all, and here's Adelaide, all totally different state, and we're the ones making all the news for all the wrong reasons.
Well, I found it interesting that we're viewed over there as an arrogant club, because that's something that even Crow supporters would probably agree is an attitude to take about the Crows, and the fact that despite the Victorians really not having a great deal of insight into our club and just sort of nibbling around the edges when there's something newsworthy going on, the fact that arrogance sort of permeates across the border is quite telling, I think. And I think the way that we've played, as administration aside, I think at times the way we've played or tried to play has been arrogant in terms of dismissing the opposition, and even little things like not tagging and stuff like that. It is arrogance.
But the interesting thing is that they don't. It is quite correct. They don't know a lot about Adelaide, really. They hear all the rumours and all the rest of it, but they don't know a lot. So what they have, they genuinely think we're arrogant. But that means that our club is giving an arrogant impression to people who don't know anything about us. So the club just can't deny that it's got this arrogant atmosphere.
And let's not forget that 3 years ago we were being lauded as a club that was completely united in that tragedy, and how well everyone, and let's give credit where it's due, because everyone associated with the club handled that particular period of time better than you could possibly ask, unthinkable set of circumstances. And we'd built up so much goodwill and so much respect. Players, coaches, administrators alike built up so much respect and credibility within the competition. And in the space of 2 or 3 years, we've just done a complete 180. And I think out of everything that I'm annoyed about with the club, the one thing that I'm annoyed about the most is that we've walked back the mantras that were in place when Phil came on. I said it a couple of weeks ago, the stuff that we bought into, we've walked right back on all of that. And, everything else aside, me personally, that's the biggest disappointment, because during that short period of time, I really felt like I had... the football club had returned to being a football club and was a club that was becoming something that I could really proudly support. And unfortunately, I just don't feel like that at the moment.
It's a good summary, I think, Steve. Very good summary.
Anyway, look, I don't know how much else we can really go on about this. I think the proof is going to be in the pudding over the... I hate it when people say that. The proof of the pudding is going to be in the eating.
Exactly. I I hate that when I was
did it myself.
Drives me crazy.
Yeah. So anyway, when we eat the pudding, I think that
the evidence will be there.
Yeah, what the appointments, as you mentioned earlier, Peter, over the next few days will be very telling. I think that we might see the club go dark for a couple of weeks. The media attention will turn to the finals. The club will have the benefit of a little bit of space, I think, to operate, and we might get snippets here and there. And they're probably not served well by the fact that Port aren't in the finals, because that doesn't preoccupy the Adelaide media. But I think the club has a bit of space now, whilst the finals is going on, to do its thing. And I think it won't be until we head into the trade period that we're really going to start hearing about this review, how it's gone on, how it's been conducted, and maybe some findings, some outcomes, because you would think that they'd have to have some changes in place before they start trying to recruit blokes into the club, wouldn't you?
There's absolutely no doubt that there'll be some bodies thrown at the members, and it'll just be a case of which, one or how many. So I think that'll be the case. But I think you're absolutely right, and we're already starting to hear the party line, and that is that it would be inappropriate for me to make any comment while there's a review in place, in process. So that will be the stonewall line that'll be coming out of the club over the next 4 weeks, which is, and that's not a criticism, because I think that's entirely appropriate, but I'm just acknowledging that that's what it's going to be. And I think that you're right, that it's going to, it'll be a fairly quiet time now, and we would expect that, and we would, we don't want to see people running off at the mouth when all that's going on. What we want is just 4 weeks, as you say, for them to be out of the spotlight, do their thing, and then it will all come to pass, when they do, as they say that they were going to do, and that's to release the key findings.
Well, with the announcement, I was going to say, with the actual announcement of the review and the timeline being 4 to 5 weeks, which means that, but by the time the grand final is finished, it should be the review should be completed, recommendations should have been made, and hopefully implemented. Do you think that's any coincidence, or do you think it is definitely aimed to make sure that they've got things in place before the trade period comes up?
Well, I think it has to be. They have to be ready to go by the time trade period starts. Otherwise, what's the point? I mean, you miss out on the whole year if you're not making the moves by then. One of the things, if you heard from Angela's interview, it was that there are some players that need to be moved on. They're just not there. They're not feeling. They're not passionate for the club. That's actually something she just said. So I think we're making sure that we've got all our ducks in a row to make some massive changes off the field. And I think sometimes people hide behind reviews because they want to make changes, but they don't want to hurt feelings as well. So, I think this is always in train, and I actually think there's going to be a fair bit of shake-up. But it's just about whether that shake-up is made through a correct decision-making process, or people are just throwing some people under the bus to protect some other of their mates. So, that'll be the devil in the detail here.
Macca, just to answer your question, I've got no doubt that whilst this review is going on, everybody will just continue getting on with their jobs. This time of the year, Hamish and Justin Reid and their teams, they'll just be going on as normal and preparing themselves for trade week and the draft as they ordinarily would.
The reason I raised that, though, and I had no doubt what you're saying is 100%. What if they do give the flick to some of the people that are involved in that, and their replacements or the people that have to fill in for them don't agree with that?
Well, it's a really good point, Macca. And again, this timing thing, I think, is not by design. I think this whole review is, externally anyway, the public nature of it has been forced on the club, because they would have started this weeks ago, I would have thought. Internally, so the biggest one, I think, Mac, is the coach, and one or two sources are whispering in my ear, and probably yours as well, Peter, that Mr. Pike may well be made the scapegoat in all of this.
I think that yeah, there are a few whispers out there, but I think also you don't have to be necessarily in the know to join some dots that have been coming out of some of the media conferences that have, particularly, Ricciuto and Chapman, and they, I don't know, there just seems to be a willingness to level this as being a coaching issue, and I think that Rue's been pretty strong in his role at Fox Footy in terms of critiquing the game plan, and even his. I don't know if you heard the interview last night he did with on 5AA, but Mark Bickley, who I'm sure would have been pre-prepared with questions, swung the interview around to the coaching issues. And there's just little sound bites that are coming out that tell me that there's not all's well.
And that's a little bit worrying. Go on.
No, go, Doc.
I was just going to say the worrying thing to me about that is if all the if you want to put your tinfoil hat on and believe all the conspiracy rumours, it's Rue backed in Burton. Everyone's looking after each other, and they want to quick kill and get on with how they want to do business status quo. And if they're able to isolate the problem to being on field and it's all box, game day coaching and not having the right tactics and not having the right game plan, then they can wrap a little bow around John Pike. He was all the problem, and then they don't have to address anything internally. And that's something that I would be worried about, especially if they're foreshadowing all that sort of other stuff. So I really want to believe that they're genuine, but all that preempting talk is dangerous to the independence of the review, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree, Don. And when you sit back and you analyse the words that have come out of the various mouths over the last week or two, and in Rue's case, probably the last month, the only person that doesn't seem to be protected from criticism is Don Pike.
Correct.
Ricciuto has protected Burton. Fagan and Chapman have protected Burton and each other. The only time I have heard anyone really be exposed is when they're talking about the coach. The only other group, I guess you'd say, that has been thrown under the bus by this club has been the players. The players were identified in 2017 as being mentally weak, rightly or wrongly. The club, instigated a massive mind camp and all the rest of it. And even now we see that we've employed a sports psychologist, a leading sports psychologist. Now, there might be some personality type testing at admin level, but to me, if you're bringing in a sports psychologist who has worked almost exclusively with sporting teams, not with administration people, then that says to me that once again, the players themselves are under scrutiny. And again, I'm yet to see anyone turn the blowtorch on the people making these bloody decisions. And that's what worries me about this whole process. And again, I get back to who commissioned this, because it seems like the blokes that should be under scrutiny are the people that are actually, shining the spotlight away from them. Go, Pete.
I was going to say, this brings me back to I guess to my point, and my concern is who's going to fill that fourth chair.
Yeah.
Because unless that fourth chair is filled by a management consultant, somebody who is experienced and briefed in looking at conflicts of interest, looking at qualifications, looking at the right people and the right jobs, all of those management issues, and we're talking about a multi-million-dollar organisation. So if you're going to have a review from top to bottom, then if you're going to fill 3/4 of that review with basically on-field matters, then unless that fourth person is there to look at off-field and look at management and look at all of the people in managerial positions, then it ain't worth a hill of beans.
Nope, that's right.
Pete, you raised one point about the psychologist, and I think that is very relevant, because I think it was Caro said that in her mind, Burton will go because of the fact that he is resented by so many people inside the football club, and in particular the players who have demanded an apology from Burton for what happened to them during the camp, and that he absolutely refuses to do it. Now,
and I think,
that's
it's really important.
If that's true, he is a prick of a man, and I've always thought he was one, but if that's true, he really is one, and he really does deserve to be kicked out of the club. And I think as sports psychologist will uncover that, Pete.
Well, Pete,
it's important. Isn't it important to have someone of those qualifications on there, I think.
Pete, you've been saying for a couple of weeks now that something happened at the bye. That irrespective of the quality of the wins in the first half of the season, the fact is that what we turned out after the bye was out of kilter with what we saw before the bye. And there's been rumblings and whispers going around about what happened during that period of time, but. What I understand is that there was a group of players that went to Andrew Fagan at the beginning of the season and expressed unhappiness about certain things, and they were promised that certain changes would be made and certain things would happen, and they followed up on those things during the bye week and were basically not satisfied with what they were told and what the progress on that was, and the people that were supposedly in charge of making those changes were protected. Brett Burton and whatnot. Now, we've all heard versions of that story, but it seems to match up very well with what the players turned out after the bye, doesn't it?
Sure.
I think so. I absolutely think so. And Caroline Wilson was on this last night. That was, she put a version of it up there and she named the players, which was the leadership group. I've got no doubt that she's got that from somewhere. She's speaking to a player or a player's partner. And we know all that from the camp stuff, and so I've got no doubt that that's happened. And look, I honestly believe that what we've seen in the second half of the year is partially player protest based. There's just, there just doesn't seem to be any other explanation for the listless kind of performances. And I'm not saying people, don't get me wrong, I would never ever suggest in a million years that a professional player would go out there to deliberately lose. I'm not suggesting that for a moment. But what we're not seeing is that, really, really impassioned sort of aggressive desperation. And I think that, in this game we all know, and they all tell us, that if you're even, 1% off, then teams, like a Brisbane who do have that, will mow you down, and that's kind of what's been happening, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. And if that's all true, and it seems to tie up with pizza and beers, because I tell you what, I've never been on a team, and probably you guys haven't either, where you get flogged for a couple of weeks and you get rewarded with a free margarita and
never
ham and cheese.
That's just one in a list of bizarre things that happened in the last 2 years, and I believe, Macca, that I think that sports psychologist will play a very, very key role in this, and that is, interviewing players, and
yes.
And I'm not talking about, Fiend, what you were referring to about on-field performance and whether they choked in the grand final or that hoo-ha. Yeah. I'm talking about the relationships between the players and management, and how that affects their, how that has been affecting their on-field performance, and how, whether there was this meeting, whether this did happen, and I'm sure that it will come out. So that's, I think, an interesting component of it. But with that said, no management consultant, doesn't wash.
Yeah, totally agree, Peter. Now, look, I think we've probably done that one to death. We could bash on for ages about this. I think my final comment, and you guys are welcome to have one as well, but my final comment is that I think as a group of supporters, we've seen that if we jump up and down enough, we do elicit a response, however genuine or disingenuous it may be from the club. The club do take notice of heavy noise from the supporter base, and I think it's important that as a supporter base, we don't just sit back at the first mention of a review and go, there we go, the club's doing the right thing and we'll back them in and yada yada yada. I'm not saying we have to smash them at every opportunity. Absolutely not. But I think we need to be vigilant. This is something that we started as a supporter base. We were the people that forced the club to go at least somewhat public about the processes in place to change what's been happening. And I think we need to see that through. So, be measured, be balanced, but please don't let the club off the hook. Otherwise, we're right back to where we started. Wouldn't you agree, gentlemen?
Yep,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Yeah.
No let up on them.
And hopefully we get a nice little auto reply from Fags or Shuts or someone from our petition.
I don't think so.
Oh, we might get something eventually. It's a busy day for them today. It took 7 weeks to get their answers back to us. We might get a Christmas card. Now, Donkey, do we have competitions to round up? Do we?
Yeah.
I'm going to just, Finn, because we're past 10 o'clock, I really am going to turn into especially after doing Sunday night and doing the interview last night, I'm just about divorced. So
I was just about to say my regards to the lovely Mrs. Peter.
Much as I would love to stay on for Donkey's competitions, I'll have to roll.
Well, I'll say good night, Cinderella.
See you guys.
Good night, Peter. All right, Donkey, crack into it, mate.
No worries. All right.
There you go, mate.
We are and obviously we had the grand final the weekend of the Real Dream Team. Dylan FCC were playing NTFC, which I'm sure is Big Sam Crow from the Big Footy Board. Sam Crow didn't fire a shot in the grand final, very 2017-esque. Dylan FCC back-to-back champions on 24-71. So congratulations, mate. You win the CrowCast Cup. Which is it's about 2.5 feet tall, half a foot wide, covered in lovely, beautiful gems, and unfortunately is too fragile to travel from my house, so you'll never see it. But I'm telling you, it's beautiful.
Listen, last year Dylan got a signed footy. That's when the club liked us.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So I might actually send Dylan a CrowCast t-shirt once they come back from the bloody printers. But well done, mate. Back to back, good stuff.
And as we come across to the tipping, we have a new champion. The king is dead. We have a new champion. So Mick Spuds takes it out on 133, 2 points clear of Moyley. Coming in second, Bayside Crow coming in third. Then we've got DSG. Nicky New fell all the way down to fifth here. J-Mac came back from a really poor start of the season. J-Mac did a Sydney from, I think, 2016 or 17. Then we got Big Joel, he's just doing what he does, comes right in the middle of the pack there. Megan V, Paulie C, Orion, Shortman, Tree Man, Fiend Man, Matt Man, and rounding up the tail is Donkey Magoo. And I'm only 41 off the pace.
So close, Don.
Yeah. Now I've got to say it's well deserved because Mick was and I don't think he'll mind us saying this. Mick was our inaugural Patreon patron.
Oh wow!
He was the very first person to support us with his hard-earned. So I must say that I'm very, very pleased for Mick, and we will definitely have something out to him, and also to Dylan. We might just reach into our pockets and grab a couple of vouchers for those two gentlemen. But look, thanks for everyone for supporting.
Well, the Crows are probably listening at the moment. Hey guys, we've had a couple of winners. Can you send us some prizes to give to them?
Yeah,
we know you're listening.
It worked last year.
No, I've actually not been a smart ass here. Can you please give us something? It'd be lovely.
Well, they might. I might have to give Shuts a bit of a text tomorrow and see if we're still in love or whether we're divorced.
I've had some good interactions with the club over the past 24 hours in terms of reaching out after some of this stuff. So I think that they are. I think that they are being responsive now, which is good. And so.
Absolutely.
Anyway, give us some prizes. That's all I'm saying. Give us some prizes and all will be forgiven. 30 pieces of silver is all I need.
Yeah, give us some prizes and you can do whatever you like with your bloody review. All right, well, look, let's wind it up there. Macca, thanks very much for joining us as usual tonight, mate.
Yeah, that's good.
Donkey, thanks very much for all the work that you put in with the competitions. Look, you're pushing shit uphill with your 5-minute segment every week, and you've done extremely well to keep it upbeat and relevant to the masses.
No, thank you. And I think next year, guys, we've been talking. We're going to double out to 10 to 15 minutes. So it's going to be great for everybody.
Well, I was gonna do it this year, but I reckon next year we've got to get into Moneyball. I think we'll give the traditional crap a bit of a miss and get into some Moneyball, make it a bit more interesting. But anyway, we'll think about that during the CrowCast review. We'll think about that, Donk. What do you reckon? We'll get some consultants in. Anyway, look, thanks to everyone on the chat for joining us, both on Spreaker and Facebook. Thanks to all our patrons who support us. If you want to support us, get around us on Patreon at patreon.com/AFL CrowCast. Bit going on the website at the moment, so check us out at aflcrowcast.com. Of course, the Sunday Wrap Show is dead and buried, so we will be back again next Tuesday night. For Tuesday Night Live, we'll probably have part 2 of Angela's interview, and we might also have another little interview of someone that I'm sure will pique people's interest.
Yeah, it will be very appealing to the masses.
Yes, indeed. Well done. All right, thanks everyone. Thanks as usual for your ongoing support. We really appreciate it. Have a good week, and we will see you next Tuesday for Tuesday Night Live.
Yeah, good night all.
Night all.